Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Musings. My name is Sara R. Turnquist. I'm a clean historical romance author of more than 20 books, and I am so happy that you have tuned in, whether you're here live or after the fact. But I'm so glad that you've come to just hear me chatter on about stuff. But happy St. Patrick's Day. Wearing my green. And happy belated Pi Day and Ides of March. There's been quite a bit going on this last week, hasn't there? I actually put a little Easter egg, if you will, in the work in progress, the manuscript that I'm working on the day, the Ides of March. But I put a little Easter egg in there for that day. So just fun things to do as an author. So I'm working on the second book in my railway romance series. It's called Annie, the Engineer's Daughter, and I am so close to finishing it. I'm 4 scenes and an epilogue away from typing the end, which is funny to me because I'm not one of those authors that puts the end at the end of my book, because to me, there's always more story, whether I'm writing it down for you or not, but the characters will continue on in some form or fashion in your mind and in mine. But at any rate, I am so excited. For those of you that have been following me for a while, you may know that it takes me roughly 3 months to do the first draft, to write the first draft of a novel, a full-length novel, that is. But this one I've been working on since October. And again, those of you that have been following me know that I suffer from seasonal affective disorder. And this wintertime, just between sickness and seasonal affective disorder and other things, it has really put a damper on my ability to write and create. So I am so excited to be near the end and then on to self-editing. But I don't even want to think about that right now. I do want to go ahead and bring on my producer, officially now my co-host for Monday Musings. And by day, she is my organizational manager. So come on, Cindy, let's say hi. There's Cindy. Yay!
Good morning. Hello. Hi.
And today I wanted us to talk about the importance of making tough choices. And what I mean by that is really choosing what is best, what will work best for you and your family, because very few things work across the board. What do you think?
100%. Each family is different. Each person within a family is different. So, what works for one family, what works for one of our children, is not going to work for every family or every child. It's just not.
Absolutely. And I think that moms, especially, not exclusively, it happens to all kinds of caregivers, but because I'm a mom, I speak from that perspective. I think that moms and caregivers are plagued with suggestions and advice from all sides, right?
Absolutely. You turn on YouTube and you're going to see all these influencers are like, this is how I make breakfast. This is how I gentle parent. This is how, I set up a routine for laundry, and that may or may not work for us. There's one lady, I kind of like to watch her stuff because she ends almost every video saying, does this work for our family? Yes. Will it work for your family? Maybe. Try it. See if it works. If it doesn't, no, just don't even try it. So I like that mindset, is like, here's an idea. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then don't use it. Don't stress. Don't make it like I have to do this or I'm a failure. Because I think that's what we do. We're like, okay, this didn't work, so I'm a failure. When it's no, it's the system that didn't work.
I totally agree. There aren't many one size fits all methods. There are just, as you mentioned, too many variables from family to family, whether that's personality, number of kids, challenges and strengths that the children face, that you face as a parent. But I think these influencers and all of these people speaking in can lead to a lot of mom guilt when the system doesn't work for me the way it did for that person or the way it worked for the person that wrote that book. And
Mhm.
so I've kind of shifted my perspective a little bit, and you alluded to it, Cindy, that these are more suggestions. You know, this worked for me. Why don't you try pieces of it?
Yeah,
So when you have that going on and when you have that perspective, you then have the freedom to choose how to best incorporate something for your family and what to incorporate.
absolutely.
Or that God gave your children to you on purpose.
Yeah.
He gave you to them and them to you because of the way that your lives, your personalities, all of that, your parenting method with the way that they receive instruction, all of that was intentional. I believe it to my core. And so I am the first one to tell mamas, trust yourself in the way that God is guiding you when it comes to your children.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned with having children was I was, okay, we're going to get back to normal. Like so we would go through a season of change. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get back to normal. There is no such thing as normal because we're constantly evolving. Like as your children get older, what worked for them when they were babies is not going to work for them when they're early elementary age, you know? So we have to be flexible and willing to evolve our systems. You know, bedtimes change. Uh, One time when my dad died, we spent I homeschooled. We spent a month not schooling because I had to go to Texas and help my mom move. And so, you know, it routines, um, advice, things can work for a time, but your life will change, and we need to change with it. We need to say, okay, what does of this will keep working? What is it of this do I need to let go of? And then not judge ourselves because we had to change. That's just how life is.
Yeah, and I think that is the key there is not judging ourselves, being kind to ourselves and gentle with ourselves when we're trying new
Mhm.
things and finding out what works and what doesn't. I think with all these suggestions, as we're calling them, come in, whether that's from influencers, pastors, other people in your life, we have to decide what matters and why that new method or whatever we want to try matters.
Mhm.
I've recently read Kendra Adachi's Lazy Genius Way, and she has a book also called The Plan, in which she talks quite a bit about this, about deciding or choosing what matters. What is it about that new method or approach that intrigues you?
Mhm.
Why would it matter for your family? And then
Mhm.
how do you incorporate it with that reasoning, with that
Yeah,
why it matters, with that as your guide?
absolutely.
So, I wanted to chat a little bit about maybe an unpopular decision that you and I made for our families that, like I said, wasn't very popular, but it was the right thing for our family. Go ahead, Cindy. Tell us about something.
Yeah, well, I have 2 real quick. The first one, in 2004, my husband was offered a job in China. Now, my parents and his parents were like, "Yes, go for it." They were excited. But a lot of people were like, "No, don't do this. This is scary. Don't go to China. There's who knows what's gonna happen there." Or my in-laws would have people saying, "You need to forbid them." Like, people at work would tell my dad, "You should forbid them." Actually, my grandmother told my dad, "You need to forbid those kids from going to China." And both both sets of parents are like, they're in their 30s. We can't decide for them. And it was a good decision. It was a challenging decision to go to China and live in a country where I didn't speak the language. Um, but I wouldn't go back and change that. And then when we came back from China, we decided to homeschool. Now we did get pushback from parents on that because like, well, what about socialization? What about like you're not an educator? Are you going to be able to meet all of their educational needs? And so we did get a lot of pushback. And then also friends would just give their advice on
Mhm.
homeschooling. So those were like two decisions that came to mind. I know you said one, but those were they kind of are tied together. Those, I feel like those two decisions were tied together.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't think. It is reality that in nature we see this about animals having to learn things, learn behaviors, make choices, all of these kind of things. There are a couple of different ways that we learn and that animals learn. You can learn by experience, which some would argue is a better way of learning because you learn the lesson really well. But there's also aversion learning, where you learn by watching someone else do something and it fell apart, or well, that's really what the aversion learning is you learn what not to do based on what you see other people do. But it can work the other way too with what we're talking about. Something worked really well for someone else. What can I pull from that?
Hmm.
But I wanted to share also an unpopular decision that we have made. I think it was the thing that stands out to me the most is when my son was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. He was not yet 3 at the time, and he is and always has been very high functioning. And we got the advice to not tell other people that he was on the autism spectrum. The advice was no one needs to know. And for me, that made me feel that, well, in reaction to that, I felt that that was almost a shame thing,
Hmm.
that it was something I needed to hide. But it's part of him, it's part of our family, it's part of who he is, it's part of who we are.
Right.
And for me and for my husband, it matters to live out my successes and struggles openly, not in your face, but to be transparent. And why that matters to me is so that other moms and families know that they're not alone,
Hmm.
um, that maybe they can see something in our story or in our struggles that encourages them, edifies them. Just like Monday Musings, I'm hoping that there are things that people are gleaning from your wisdom, Cindy, and from my experience that will give them a little piece of light, a little piece of hope. If that is what happens for anybody, then I would
Hmm.
call Monday Musings an overwhelming success.
Absolutely. I think we see all of what we see of people when we're in public is this a mask or a facade. And we can look at someone's life, but not see what's going on underneath that facade. And they could be a hot mess, but they're presenting to the world this perfect, polished, I have everything together. And then
Mhm.
we judge ourselves. We don't ever, I think we don't stop to say, I wonder what's really going on. We tend to think, oh my goodness, I don't compare to them. I'm not as put together as that person. So what is wrong with me? And
Mm.
not realize, maybe they're hiding something. Maybe there's a hurt there that they feel like they need to cover. Or maybe they're just organized. That's just their flair. They like, I had a girlfriend in Wisconsin, and I see that with you too. You like to decorate for the seasons. And at first I used to beat myself up. I'm like, I don't do that. But also Sean doesn't want that kind of stuff. He and I do, that's just, we enjoy it when we go to other people's homes, but we don't think to put it in our house. And it's not that one's right or one's wrong. It's just how we choose to do things. Um, and I can celebrate that instead of judging myself, saying what's wrong with me. I can celebrate that you and this friend, that my friend was from Wisconsin, that you guys have this creative bent that I get to benefit from. I get to enjoy. You know what I mean? It's how we look at how people live their lives. Celebrate with them instead of judge ourselves.
Yeah. And I wanted to touch on something that you said earlier about seasonal changes. And I don't mean necessarily like the seasons of the earth, although that's part of it, but the seasons of our life. The toddler season is going to look different than the teenage season. It just is.
Mhm.
And anybody listening probably is like, well, yeah. Um, so you and I, especially in my mind, I think about this. Our kids' educational experiences have been very different from what I see out there a lot. And I mean, my kids have done public school, Montessori school, private Christian school, and now we're looking at making another change. And all along the way, none of those decisions were wrong. They were what we were led to do in that season. But knowing that the season does change has us always reevaluating. My husband and I are always reevaluating, is this the best decision for our kids, for our family, um, for what all these variables coming in look like. My
Mhm.
kids have some challenges that are not unique to them, but maybe the mix of challenges is a little unique in our family. We have autism spectrum disorder, we have anxiety disorder, that diagnosis in the kids. We have some, ADHD in our kids, and depression, and all of these different flavors.
Mhm.
And so, as we continue to manage and facilitate those things the best that we possibly can, providing resources and matching their educational experience to what they need, that is going to change over time. But
Absolutely.
why don't you share a little bit more about homeschooling and the other things that your kids did educationally?
Well, when we were living in China, they were going to a private American school, and it was through the Lutheran church, and they had a very high level education. Most of the teachers were either master degree or doctorate, and it was very small. And so when we moved back to the States, we're like, well, let's see. You, actually, a couple of friends are like, oh, they're going to be way advanced compared to what they were doing in the States. And also, it was important for Sean and I to help our children discover their gifts and their talents,
Mhm.
what interests them. We wanted to teach them how to critically think about things. And so that was one of the reasons we chose to homeschool. Well, not one of those were several of the reasons why we chose to homeschool. And we said, we'll just see how it goes. And it became a family lifestyle. It wasn't just we had our homeschooling and we had our family. It became part of our life, still to this day, I see my girls, if they want to know about something, they know how to study it, how to research it. Um, and we did find ways for them to be socialized. We had them, at one point, they were part of Bible quizzing where they would they had a team and they learned scripture, and then they would go and have these competitions against other churches. And then when we moved here to Tennessee, I found a homeschool cooperative group that had a drama program, and both of the girls got very involved in that. And so Tuesdays, we didn't get a lot of schoolwork done because we were at this co-op. Ellie learned Spanish. She did um, Dave Ramsey's high school program for financial literacy, and also drama. Robin did drama. So, they were with other kids, and they were able to be in a cooperative learning environment. But at the same time, then we were also more in control of what they were learning at home, like, science. And um, I also tried to gear their schoolwork towards their interests. So, like their senior year in high school, I let them decide what science they wanted. Robin chose two sciences because she's like her dad. So she did psychology and meteorology. And then Ellie chose marine science because she was going to aquariums, and so we did marine science, and I could gear that towards their personal taste, and it worked out really well for us. I had people who supported me, and then there was always those people who are like, "Aren't you concerned about them not getting socialized enough?" Or I'm like, "Well, they are getting socialized. I'm just kind of more in control of how they're socializing." But
Yeah.
yeah. you
Yeah,
know.
I think that's a good point that you're making, how we have a tendency as human beings to question the choices that others are making that we may not agree with. And so, like, even when you get um, advice, from well-meaning books, pastors, sermons, people in our lives, I think it is very helpful and very important to try to identify the heart and intention of the person.
Mhm.
So we're all doing the best that we can with the information that we have and the way that the Lord is leading us, whether we are actively following him or passively, in a sense that he's leading us and guiding us all, whether we identify with that or not.
Yeah.
Most people are well-meaning. I
Mhm.
believe that. So whether or not you agree with what someone else is doing or the advice that someone is giving you, I encourage you to take a minute and respond with grace and kindness. We don't have enough of that in our world today. Things are so divisive, and my heart hurts when I see the way people are talking to each other and judging each other.
Mhm.
Jesus says, especially Christians, I'm going to say that before I go on here, especially Christians, because Jesus says that others will know we are his followers by the way that we love each other.
Mhm.
The Bible also tells us to live with each other in an understanding way. And so I try my best. I'm not always good at it, but I really try to remember to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe with advice that you get that chafes you a little bit, that you really don't like, maybe sometimes, I'm using a lot of vague words here. For me, at least, those are some of the places where I really need to consider the most. Because when
Mhm.
something chafes me emotionally, or something mentally, something in that regard, it's often God pointing out something to me. And so I've learned in my limited experience and understanding that those are places I really, really need to pay attention. But when you get advice and when you hear thoughts from an influencer, a sermon, things like that, I would also encourage everybody out there to look at your family situation and with a sensitivity to the Lord guiding you, find out how it might matter to you and your family or what truth is there in it, and
Amen.
just let the rest go. So what
Absolutely.
about what about you, Cindy? Have you ever gotten just really great advice?
Um, okay, so some advice that has stuck with me was when Robin was 2 and Ellie was like a week and a half old, and this lady at church came up to me, put her arm around me and said, "First of all, you're gonna get through this."
Hmm.
But said, "Be gentle with yourself. Do not judge yourself because you're gonna make mistakes, but God's grace is bigger." And I
Hmm.
remember that to this day. So, when I made mistakes when the girls were growing up. Um, our youngest Ellie is on the autism spectrum as well. I still make mistakes to this day, but be gentle with myself, be willing to say, "Hey, especially now that the kids are older, I messed up. I'm
Yeah.
sorry." So that advice has stuck with me to be gentle, give myself grace. And then
Hmm.
as the kids have gotten older, I'm like, be willing to say I'm sorry
Hmm.
when we mess up. So yeah, that's some really good advice. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, one of the pieces of advice that I got, probably from a counselor, as my memory serves, you get to decide who has that place in your life, in your circle, that allows them to speak into your life, to advise you, to kind of ask questions about your decisions. Not everyone is in that circle. Not everyone needs to be in that circle. And you get to choose who you are listening to,
Yeah.
whether or not they are in that circle. They people will speak into your circumstances, but you get to decide what voices you listen to.
Yeah. And I think
Uh,
in this day of age of social media being such a big thing, we don't need to be sharing everything with everybody.
mm,
Because if we put it out there, people are going to say, oh, I can speak into this. And they, like you just said, not everyone has that right to speak into our lives. So I think like that's something I'm encouraging Robin and Ellie to, you don't have to share everything with everybody
mhm.
because then people are going to think they have a right to give you their opinion. So have those trusted
Yeah.
people. I love that advice.
Yeah. And when I think about maybe an instance of not such great advice, um, as I was thinking through what I wanted us to cover today, I thought, there are not really major decisions that I remember getting not so great advice or maybe even bad advice about. There are probably many smaller instances that just went by the wayside, how it
Mm,
does. I have been extremely blessed with people in my life that are wise and caring and gracious. That goes back to what I said earlier: choose wisely who you allow into that sphere, into
yeah.
that circle where they have permission from you to speak into your life, whether that's advice or maybe even some sharpening, some iron sharpening iron, where they're kind of maybe even chafing you a little bit with the things that they're saying for you to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I did have a friend, and our relationship was changing because this person was significantly older than me, and she was a mentor, and gave me some really. I mean, like I could call her and like, how do I know that the potatoes are done boiling and are
Mm,
good to be made into mashed potatoes? I mean, it was that kind of relationship, and just she's an amazing woman. Unfortunately, one time she gave me some bad advice, and we were moving out of state, and Sean was taking a new job, and she's like, "Cindy, don't share your struggles with him because he's got a lot on his plate." And so I
mm,
didn't. I regret it because I started having panic attacks. I went through a really bad period of being angry all the time. And when I finally shared with Sean my struggles and what was happening, because of when we moved and we got settled, and I'm like, it was October, and I'm like trying to join these different groups, and one group's like, well, if you have childcare you can join. I just moved there, so I didn't have childcare. Then the other one's like, well, we only have 2 more sessions before we're done for Christmas, so why didn't you wait till after Christmas to join? And I just was really at a low point, and I wasn't sharing. But when I finally started sharing with Sean and I told him what had happened, he's like, that don't ever do that again. Don't all If you're struggling, let me know because we're in this together. And so yeah, that was some not good advice.
yeah. Yeah, that's hard because, like I said, I can see the intention of that advice being well-meaning, but didn't play out the way that it
Yeah,
was maybe intended.
exactly. And it
Um,
was well meaning, but it was just
mm,
I probably took it too because I kind of can be an all or nothing person, so I probably
mm,
took it too far. But I've learned, and I think that's what
yeah.
this is. We learn what is good and what is not good, and we learn
Mm,
to not listen to everything versus like before when we were both young moms, we probably were taking it all in and trying to do it all. And now we're like,
yeah.
you know what? This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. So,
Yeah. So before we wrap up, I did want to give you an opportunity to speak into the question: how have you, or how could we, as moms slash caregivers, navigate advice from well meaning books, pastors, sermons, people in our lives?
for books and stuff, I do try to read them with, okay, what will fit in my family? You know what fits in your family. So if you're reading a book and you know that you're not like, okay, for me, I like to get up early in the morning and have a quiet time. We're all told by lots of people, get up early, have a quiet time.
Mhm.
Well, maybe you're not a morning person. That's not going to work in your life. So figure out when, if you're have young kids, maybe you could have a quiet time when they're napping, or maybe it's after they go to bed at night. Um, So don't feel like you have to find out what works for you in your life. Um, if you have someone who wants to give you a lot of advice and you know that it might not be some advice that you want to follow, I've learned to say, you know what, I really appreciate that you care enough about me to share that, and I'm going to think about it. I'm going to, my mother-in-law, when my mom had um, dementia, and I was trying to figure out how to deal with this person and take care of this person who had dementia. My mother-in-law was reading everything she could to give me advice. And so
Mm,
I would say, okay, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try your suggestion. And she would say later, did it work? And I would say yes or no,
mm,
but, you know, just, she was trying to help me. So she was coming from a point of like, hey, I want to help you get through this. But
mm,
then other people are giving me advice, and I'm like, I really appreciate you offering that. That's something I will think about it. And I
yeah.
doesn't mean I'm promising to put it into
Mhm.
action, um, but I'm going to think about it and not get angry. I think sometimes we want to get angry with someone giving us advice that maybe we know won't work for us, and we're like, well, who are they to be
Mm,
speaking into my life? Well, no, try to remind yourself, okay, they're coming from a place where they care about you.
mhm.
They want the best for you. So you can just say, thank you for that advice. I will think about
I love that response. And I think that even when we have people trying to speak into our life and their intention is not well meaning, maybe they have an agenda or an ulterior motive, or they're maybe trying to manipulate in some way. I think that responding like you are, with kindness and understanding and grace, um even, I mean, treat them as if they're well meaning, even if you suspect they are not, because that's not going to end badly for you if you are treating others with understanding and kindness. I think a lot of people feel and think that being kind and gracious makes you a doormat, and I think it can, but I think I would rather err on that side
it.
than to be ready for a fight every time someone says something I don't like or something that I don't agree with. But anyways, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Here I am talking about it, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to get into all that.
No,
But
exactly.
just be kind, be kind,
Hmm.
be considerate, and be thankful that they care enough to speak into your life, regardless of their
Their
motive.
motive.
Because
Absolutely.
most people are well-meaning, I think, in
Hmm.
those situations. Bad advice are good, they're well-meaning.
Absolutely.
But anyways, thank you so much, Cindy, as always, for your wisdom. I appreciate the way you speak into my life, in the practical ways, in the good advice, and in the heart, in your heart toward me and my family and my kids.
Mm. Well, I love you
I
guys.
so appreciate that, and we love you. We love
And
our
you
Miss
speak
Cindy.
into my lives. You are my life. I have multiple lives. You speak into my
Uh,
life and my family. My family just, oh yeah, we love you very much and your whole family.
yeah. And so I think it is important to have those people in your life. And as I have been blessed to, choose wisely, choose those
Mhm.
people really carefully. We are thinking about renaming Monday Musings. So I am going to put this out to those of you that are watching and listening. Why don't you drop in the comments some thoughts about what you think we should call Monday Musings? It will continue to be on Monday, but we would like a title that better incorporates more of what we're talking about. We always talk about the importance of something, but we cover things, such as, living life, following the Lord, mental health, writing, you name it. No topic is off limits except maybe
Mm.
politics.
Yeah. We could talk about the weather and the state of the roads.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, thank you again, Cindy. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I am excited to see you next Monday, and I'm excited to find out what we're talking about.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.